Hello friends, welcome to the new session of Mycology. In today's lecture we will be discussing the introduction of mycology, its general property and the classification of fungus. So if we see the objectives of today's session, it would be the introduction, the beneficial and the harmful effects of fungus, its morphology, its classification, which is we will be discussing the two type of classification. One is the based on its morphology, another is the systemic classification, and we will see different fungal disease which are popularly known as mycoses. So let's start the session. The introduction. Mycology is basically it is the study of the fungi, because myx in Greek means fungus. So that is the thing, and when you see the lab diagnosis of mycology, you will many time will hear the sebrod agar. That sebrod is derived from the name, the person who has extensively worked on dermatophytes and cultivated them. So Raymond Sebrod is considered as the father of medical mycology. If we see the general properties of fungus, you will see that it is eukaryotic. There is no chlorophyll in this, so they are also known as chlorophyll-less plants. The cell wall is made up of chitin. If you compare with the plant cell wall is made up of chiefly of cellulose. Bacteria, it is peptidoglycan. Animal cell, there would be no cell wall. So that is the unique feature. Its cytoplasmic membrane contains sterol, ergosterol. Animal cell contains cholesterol. So that is the difference. It may be unicellular as a yeast. It may be multicellular many times as a mold. They may reproduce asexually as well as sexually. They are obligate or facultative anaerobes, and they prefer to grow at slightly acidic pH. So these are the general properties of the fungus. If we see the beneficial effect of fungus, the most important is they are the end user of any chain. So they are saprophyte. So they will make sure that anything which would die or the decay, again it would be recycled and it is usable by the plant, and all cycles runs with the help of such saprophytes. The production of food and alcohol. Then various drugs. You must remember the penicillium and the penicillin. So antibiotics are produced by the fungus. Vaccine, they are used as a carrier. Now we see in next slide, you can see the mushroom is there in this picture, which can be used as a food itself. You will see various fermented food like cheese, cake, bread, wine. This all are fermented with different kind of fungus. And this vaccine, if you see, it is a vaccine for hepatitis B virus, but it uses Saccharomyces cerevisiae yeast as a vehicle to express the DNA or the gene of the hepatitis B, and vaccine is produced by recombinant DNA technology. So these are the uses of fungus. And if we see the harmful effects, it starts with the diseases. The pathogenic fungi or the opportunistic pathogen may produce the disease. Though it should be noted that there are very few fungus which are truly pathogenic. Most of them are saprophyte or the normal flora. It may produce mycotoxicosis. It is the disease which is produced when we consume the food which is contaminated with fungus and it has the presence of fungal toxins. So that is mycotoxicosis. The similar thing is mycetismus. The difference between the mycotoxicosis and mycetismus is when somebody consumes poisonous mushroom. You must be knowing that all mushrooms are not edible. Some of the mushroom has a poisonous property, and by mistake somebody consumes that poisonous mushroom, that is a toxic for them, and that is known as mycetismus. It may spoil the improperly stored agricultural products and the food, and it may even decay the fabric, leather, timber, etc., especially in when the moisture in the environment is high. At that time this would occur. You may have seen the fungus growing in the various things. So these are the harmful effects of fungus. Now we discuss the morphology of fungus. They have basic two forms. One is known as unicellular yeast form, and other is multicellular, which is also known as mold form. Yeast is a unicellular budding form, and when they grow to form a tubular structure, if they have septa in between, that is known as septate, and if it is a continuous tubular structure, which is known as non-septate or aseptate hypha. And when this hypha entangled to form a network like structure, which is known as mycelium. So there are two forms, unicellular, it is a yeast, and multicellular, that is a mold. Classification is, there are two type of classification. One is the morphological, or it is a working type of classification, where you see the fungus and you can classify into different classes like yeast-like fungi, molds, and the dimorphic fungi. The other is systemic classification, which is scientific, which is based on its sexual reproduction. As per that, there are 4 classes of fungi. We'll see both classification one by one. So first, it is morphological. Yeast, they are unicellular round to oval cells. They reproduce by budding, few by fission. On culture, they would produce creamy, smooth and moist colony. The example is Cryptococcus neoformans. Other is yeast-like fungi. They are also having this same unicellular budding cell, but they may grow partly as a yeast, and sometimes that budding cell elongate, and there is a chain of bud which look like pseudomycelium, which look like hyphae, which is not a true hyphae. That's why it is known as pseudomycelium. Example is Candida albicans. The third type in this classification is the mold or the filamentous fungi, which produces true hyphae, mycelia, and on that mycelia it may bear different kind of spores like dermatophytes, aspergillus. These all are molds or the filamentous fungi. And fourth class in this morphological classification is the dimorphic fungus. Now, as its name suggests, it can have both the morphology. It may occur as a yeast as well as a mold. Now, this would be decided by the temperature, and most of the time in the host tissue or in the culture at 37 degree centigrade, they would appear as yeast. When they are as a saprophyte in the soil, or if you grow at around 22 degrees centigrade, they would appear as a mold or the filamentous fungi. That's why they are known as dimorphic, because they show the both the kind of morphological feature. That's why they are known as dimorphic fungus. Example is Histoplasma capsulatum, Basidiomycetes, etc. Now here you can see, you will see the yeast, which is unicellular fungus. So here you can see the yeast which is unicellular and they produce budding, and this is the multicellular hyphae which produces various mycelium. So that is the thing. Now we are coming to systemic classification. The first is the zygomycetes. They are the lower fungi. They would be non-septate hyphae, and its sexual spore is known as zygospore. Yeah. And the example are rhizopus and the mucor. You will see the plate having colonies. You will see the microscopic feature as well as the plate on which you can see the filamentous colonies are there. The second class is ascomycete. Here the sexual reproduction is there is a sac-like structure which is formed, which is known as ascus, and inside that there would be sexual spore which are known as ascospores. Many yeast are ascomycetes, and some filamentous fungi like Aspergillus niger. Here you can see the microscopic feature of Aspergillus niger and its growth in the sebrodagar. The third type is the basidiomycetes. Septate hyphae, there would be sexual spore. There would be a basidium is formed on which there would be spores which are known as basidiomycetes. Examples are mushrooms, Cryptococcus neoformans. These are the example of basidiomycetes. And the fourth class in systemic classification is, it is basically the leftover thing. So wherever we don't know the exact sexual state of fungus, or if some fungus lacks the sexual stage of reproduction, they all are grouped together as a deuteromycetes, or the fourth class. That's why it is also known as fungi imperfecta. Most of the fungi of medical importance are included in this stage. Example is Candida albicans. So this is systemic classification. 4 classes: zygomycetes, ascomycetes, basidiomycetes, and deuteromycetes, or they are also known as fungi imperfecta. So these are 4 classes of fungus with examples. These are various spores of fungus. You can see the zygospore, which is sexual spore of this, ascospores, basidiospores. Fungus do produce various asexual spore also, which are either for the reproduction or for the survival in the various condition. So these are blastospores, arthrospores, and chlamydospores. These are known as vegetative spores, and some are aerial spores which are known as conidiospore, in which microconidia and macroconidia, and sporangiospores. So these are the vegetative spores like blastospores and all that, and these are aerial spores where you can see the microconidia, which is unicellular, macroconidia, which is multicellular, conidia, and in this sporangiospore, where there is a big sac-like sporangium is there, in which there would be spores, and these are in the aerial hyphae. These spores would travel with the air current, and whenever it reaches, it would lead to the production of fungal hyphae. So that is asexual reproduction of the fungus. Now the last part of our session, that is mycoses or the fungal disease. Now you know that we have classified mycoses based on the site which is involved. So superficial is the outermost layer of the skin and the hair. Cutaneous, many times in some books superficial and cutaneous are merged. We are putting that separate because there is a clinically they are distinct. Cutaneous are due to dermatophytes. Then subcutaneous, which is beneath the skin, subcutaneous, and systemic mycosis, which would originate in lung and spread in various organs. So that's why it is known as systemic mycosis. And one type of different mycosis, which is known as opportunistic mycosis. When patient's immunity is low, the fungus will produce the various infection. That is known as opportunistic mycosis. And due to advancement in medical field, there are many patients who are immunocompromised. For example, organ transplant recipient, patient who have received steroids, patient having chemotherapy. These all are more treatment which produces the immunocompromised person, and that would allow the fungus to grow and produce the infection. So if we start first, superficial mycosis, it is the outermost layer of skin and its appendages. There is no or very minimum immune response. The diseases are basically of low virulence, mild, and of cosmetic importance only, like pityriasis versicolor. Here the disease is this. Pydra, which is the nodule formation in hair. So these are the example of superficial mycosis. The second class is the cutaneous mycosis, which involves epidermis, hair, and skin and its appendages. There would be immune response in this. The example is dermatophytes. These are the ringworm or the tinea. Various part of body is involved in this. Fungal disease, third is subcutaneous, where it goes beneath the epidermis. So dermis, subcutaneous tissue, muscle, fascia, which would be involved. By any chance, traumatic implantation of fungus, and it is a chronic disease. Example is mycetoma, sporotrichosis, etc., where you will see the subcutaneous lesion, nodule-like structure, and chronic fungal inflammation would be there. Next would be systemic mycosis, that is caused by saprophytic fungus via inhalation of spores. It originates in the lung and then it spreads to various organ of our body. Mostly this systemic mycosis is produced by dimorphic fungus like histoplasmosis, blastomycosis, etc. These are the example of this fungus. And the last but not the least is the opportunistic mycosis. It may produce systemic infection also, where various organs are involved. Basically it would occur in immunocompromised host or the host with certain predisposing condition. So candidiasis, aspergillosis, zygomycosis, cryptococcosis, these are the example of this fungus. In immunocompromised patient, this may lead to life-threatening infection also. So these are the opportunistic mycosis. And patient with HIV/AIDS, or as I have said, that patient with by any means the immunity is compromised, they are prone to develop opportunistic mycosis. See, this is the called tip of iceberg phenomena. It shows that the thing which is seen is far less than the actual thing. So medical mycology, many times we don't think of fungal disease, and so many fungal diseases are remain unnoticed and undiagnosed, and so they are untreated. So now with a modern diagnostic technique we could able to diagnose the thing, but For that we have to first think that there may be fungal infection. So that is the medical mycology iceberg. And in the summary, we revisit the important point. General property, you know that they are eukaryotic cell. Its morphological classification, there are 4 classes: yeast-like fungus, molds, and the dimorphic fungus. Systemic classification, again there are 4 classes: zygomycetes, ascomycetes, basidiomycetes, and where sexual stage is not known, they are known as deuteromycetes or fungi imperfecta.